I'm here just outside my greenhouse and I'm about to plant some seeds in pots. I've planted most of my seed starts already, but I'm about to do another batch of some warm season seeds like melons and basil. So I just thought I'd give you a rundown of what I do to start seeds. I make my own seed starting mix from a recipe that I got from my stepfather, and it has worked really well for me for many years, and so I keep making it and I recommend it to anybody that asks. So what I do is I get a wheelbarrow and I mix 1 part sand, 1 part vermiculite, 1 part topsoil or native soil from your garden, and 1 part well-aged compost or worm castings. So equal parts of these, and I do a wheelbarrow load at a time, so I do a bag of each or a cubic yard bag of each. And I mix that really thoroughly in a wheelbarrow, and then I add some minerals. So I get these Espoma brand organic mineral amendments. So I get green sand, which has a lot of trace minerals that the baby plants, that the little seedlings need in order to develop good root systems and grow rapidly and be really healthy and transplant well. So I do about a cup of green sand in a wheelbarrow full of my seed mix. I do a cup of rock phosphate, so this is just pelletized phosphorus, and this is really great for root growth. And then I add a cup of garden lime, and this helps balance the pH. And then I do a cup of kelp. Now you can get this in the Espoma brand bags just like I showed the other stuff, but I use this for a lot of things, including feeding to my chickens. So I get kelp in 50-pound bags because it's cheaper that way, and I use it on the garden straight as a nitrogen supplement for my greens beds, and I use it in my chicken feed. So this is kelp, and I use about a cup of this as well. So 4 main soil parts and 4 mineral amendments in equal parts. And then, so I mix that all together, and what I end up with is this really nice sort of fluffy soil here. This is not a sterile seed mix, which is what you'll find in most garden stores in bags. And common recommendation for starting seeds is to use a sterile seed mix, and there's a reason I don't do that. I like to prepare my seedlings for the real world, for lack of a better explanation. The garden soil that they're going to be going into is not sterile, and I want them prepared for what they're about to be going into. And so I want to start them not only in a not sterile environment, I want to start them in a nutrient-rich environment that has a little bit of the microorganisms that are naturally found in the soil they're going into, to help them adjust and help them get started and have a really nice, start to life. When plants are growing, it's not just about the nutrients in the soil that keeps them healthy. It's about the biology in the soil that they have a symbiotic relationship with, and I want to kick that relationship off right from the start. So this mix is not sterile. It has microorganisms from that native soil from my garden that goes into this mix. And then the last thing that I do before I plant into it is I sift it. So right now it's kind of chunky. It's got larger pieces of wood and bits that are in the topsoil or in the compost. And also it's got a little bit of charcoal, crushed charcoal that we make here, and I just add that in. You don't have to, but it's a good addition to this mix. And so if I have it around, I'll toss some in there, because that is the charcoal acts as a really nice sort of home for those microorganisms. They like to, because it's porous, and so the microbiology in the soil that you want, those beneficial organisms that help plant growth likes to make a home in that charcoal. So I add a little charcoal when I can. So what I do before I plant in it is I'm going to put it through sort of a sifter that I made out of, this is my sifter, and it's just some scrap lumber that I put into a frame and attached 1/4 inch hardware cloth to it. Now I'm going to run my seed mix through this, and it's going to sift out anything bigger than 1/4 inch, which makes the soil mix really nice and soft and fine and fluffy. And when I plant my seeds in there, if I need to divide my seedlings or separate them out, they will do that much cleaner and much nicer without damaging the roots, because the soil mix is really fine. So I'm gonna sift that, and then what I'm gonna use, I'm gonna put my soil mix into different containers depending on what seeds I'm using. So I'm gonna be planting melon seeds, which are rather large, and they don't like transplanting super well, and they grow really rapidly. So I'm gonna put them in big pots so that they can spend a couple of weeks getting probably about this big, and then I can transplant them before they ever start to maximize the space in the pot, before they ever start to outgrow it. Because once they start to outgrow the space, they can become root bound, and this isn't good for any seedlings, but melons and cucumbers and squashes especially don't like getting root bound, and so I want to avoid this as much as possible by using big pots. So these are 4-inch pots, and I'm gonna plant my melons right into here. And I'm gonna do them in pairs of 2, so that when I plant them in the garden, I can plant them in mounds in pairs. And if I were doing small seeds like tomatoes or peppers or cabbages or something like that, I would use a 10-20 tray with these kinds of inserts. I like these. They're rather large. They're on the large side. You can get smaller ones for smaller plants, but if I'm doing tomatoes, I want nice big cells. So this is a 6-pack, and there are a 10-20 tray will fit 6 of these, so I can get 36 seedlings in a 10-20 tray. And this gives enough space for the tomatoes so that if I don't want to up pot them before...
They're starting inside.
So if I don't want to up pot my tomatoes before I put them in the ground, this will last them a while. This will last them 4 or 5 weeks before I really need to put them into anything bigger. And if I want to wait any longer than that before I transplant them into the garden, I'll want to up pot them into 4-inch pots like this. You can start tomatoes directly in 4-inch pots, but I find that if I'm going to put them in the ground when they're little, this is a bit of a waste of space. And I want to be able, I can only fit so much in my greenhouse at a time. So I'm going to go for these. Now, if I'm going to be planting something with really tiny seeds that don't mind being separated upon planting, what I'll do is I will use one of these 10-20 trays like this, and I will fill it with my seed mix in an open tray. No inserts, no separations, no divisions. and I will just fill this tray, and then I will sprinkle my seeds over the top of it, and then follow with a light layer of seed mix to cover the seeds, and then they will grow really thickly, and then before they get too big, I'll pull them out and I'll separate them and I'll plant them individually into the garden. So I'm going to do that with my basil plants. So that is kind of how I start my seedlings and how I make my mix, and I hope that that was helpful.